The morning light was soft over the meadows of Illustra. The sky had a pale silver color, touched by clouds that moved slowly, carried by the planet's gentle winds. Captain Mira Vance walked across the field, her boots brushing against the tall grass that shimmered under the twin suns. She walked quietly, her thoughts far away, her expression calm but distant. Beside her walked Idrin, her companion. He looked human in every way, tall with calm eyes and steady movements. But his voice was too smooth and his steps too measured. He was an android, built to assist with Illustra's atmospheric systems, but Mira treated him more like a friend. They walked without talking, as they often did. It had become their habit after Mira left the service years ago. She had once been part of the human expansion fleet, exploring new systems and building colonies. But after the wars, the long, bitter wars that left whole worlds empty, she had chosen silence over glory. Now her work was quiet. She was the caretaker of the atmospheric shield, a massive invisible barrier that protected Illustra from solar radiation and space debris. Most of the time the system ran by itself. Her duty was mostly observation. She liked it that way. As they reached a small hill overlooking the shield control tower, a soft breeze passed them. Mira closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost hear something in the wind, a faint whisper or maybe just a memory. Idrin stopped and turned to her. "Temperature and wind flow are normal," he said. "You seem thoughtful." Mira smiled slightly. "The air here feels alive sometimes," she said. "Like it's trying to say something." He tilted his head. "Air cannot speak, Captain." "I know," she said softly. "But maybe humans can hear more than data sometimes." He looked at her for a few seconds longer, as if trying to understand a meaning hidden behind her words. Then he simply nodded, and they continued walking. Later that day, Mira returned to the control tower. The room was quiet, filled with the hum of machines. The holographic screens floated in the air, showing energy readings, shield strength, and atmospheric pressure. She sat at the console, sipping her tea, when a small red light blinked on the top panel. It wasn't an alarm, just a signal alert. She leaned forward. "Unregistered transmission detected," the system reported. "Source orbital space, frequency unknown." Mira frowned. Illustra's orbit was supposed to be empty except for weather satellites. She tapped the screen. A series of coded numbers appeared, then turned into faint sound patterns. It was a whisper, a human voice, broken and distant. She played it again, adjusting the filters. The voice became clearer but still weak, almost like it was carried by the wind. "Still walking with you." Her heart stopped for a second. The words repeated, soft and strange. She ran another scan. The signal came from high orbit near the shield's upper layer. It was not a standard frequency used by humans. Idrin entered the room. "You look troubled," he said. "I'm picking up something." "A voice," Mira replied. "Listen." She played the sound again. The voice was faint but definitely human, female, calm, and filled with emotion. Idrin analyzed the data. "It is not a known communication pattern. The source appears embedded in the upper atmosphere. That should be impossible." "Maybe a reflection from an old satellite," Mira said, though she didn't sound sure. "Perhaps," he replied. "But the voice data contains emotion markers. It feels almost familiar." Mira leaned back, staring at the screen. Her hands trembled slightly. She didn't understand why, but the voice felt like something she had lost long ago, like the sound of a world that no longer existed. The next morning, she sent a report to the Illustra Communications Council. They responded with polite disbelief. "No evidence of foreign transmission," the message said. "Atmospheric distortions common. Continue standard duty." She closed the message window with a sigh. "They don't believe me," she said. Idrin stood nearby. "Perhaps it is better that way. Unknown signals often bring fear, or discovery," Mira replied. She decided to investigate on her own. They took a hover transport and rose through the mist toward the higher plateau, the point where Illustra's winds were strongest. The ride was quiet, the landscape wide and endless. Below them, rivers shone like silver threads. When they landed, the wind hit them harder, carrying a strange tone, like music made of air. Mira stood still, listening. Then she heard it again. A voice, clear this time. "Human. We're still walking with you." She turned to Idrin. "You heard that?" "Yes," he said after a moment. "I detected low-frequency modulation, but it matches human vocal range." Her mind raced. The message had traveled through the air itself. That meant it wasn't just a transmission, it was part of the planet's atmosphere. "Idrin," she said quietly, "what if this isn't new? What if this has been here since before we came?" He processed her words. "You suggest the atmosphere contains human origin data, ancient signals." "Maybe from Earth," she whispered. The name felt heavy. Earth, humanity's first home, lost centuries ago when the wars ended and the oceans burned. No one had heard from it since. She sat on a rock staring at the open horizon. The twin suns were setting, painting the clouds orange and gold. "When I left Earth," she said slowly, "I thought I'd forget its sound. But maybe it never forgot us." Idrin stood beside her, silent. The wind blew across the plains, carrying soft whispers that almost formed words. He looked at her and said, "Humans find meaning in noise. Perhaps that is why you survive so long." She smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe we leave pieces of ourselves behind wherever we go." That night, Mira couldn't sleep. The voice kept echoing in her mind. She opened her log recorder and spoke quietly. Day 14 observation record. Unknown signal repeating every 2 hours. Phrase sounds human. "We're still walking with you." Emotional tone peaceful, not distress. Possible remnant of pre-expansion broadcast. Emotional response. Strong. She stopped recording and stared out the window. The night sky was filled with stars, and above them a faint shimmer of the atmospheric shield glowing like a living thing. Suddenly the signal came again. Stronger this time. Her console lit up with strange data. The frequency was fluctuating, forming a pattern. When she mapped it, the pattern showed a spiral, the same shape as Earth's old weather systems. Her breath caught. "Idrin, it's changing." He appeared beside her, scanning the data. "This is not random. It is a message loop repeating coordinates. Coordinates to where?" He hesitated. "To this world's southern pole." Mira grabbed her coat. "We're going there." The journey took several hours. The southern region of Illustra was colder, covered in thin ice plains and whispering winds. They landed near an old weather station that hadn't been active in years. As they stepped out, the air was filled with the same faint sound. The voice again, now mixed with other tones like a chorus of memories. Idrin connected his sensors. "The source is below the surface. There's an ancient satellite core buried under the ice." Mira brushed snow from the hatch of the old structure. "Help me open it." Together they pried it open. Inside was a small sphere glowing faintly blue, a memory beacon. The label on it was almost erased, but one word remained. Terra. Mira stared at it, her heart racing. "It's from Earth." When she activated it, the air filled with soft light. A hologram appeared, not a person, but a swirl of colors and sound. The voice returned, clearer than ever. "To those who came after us. We send our breath, our laughter, our steps. We walked the same winds once. If you find this, remember, you are never alone in the sky." The light faded, leaving silence. Mira stood still, tears in her eyes. "It wasn't just a signal," she whispered. "It was a message. A memory." Adrian looked at her. "From your ancestors?" "From us," she said softly. "From what we were." They stood side by side, the breeze passing between them, carrying that ancient voice through the cold night air. And for the first time in years, Mira smiled, a small quiet smile, as if the wind itself had whispered back. The cold air bit gently at Mira's face as she stood beside the ancient beacon. The blue light had faded, but the echo of that voice, warm, human, and full of longing, still lingered in her ears. For a long time, she didn't speak. Idrin watched her quietly, his sensors still active. "The signal is stable," he said at last. "It continues to pulse at a steady rhythm. It is as if the beacon wants to stay awake." Mira knelt beside the small sphere, brushing frost from its surface. The word Terra glowed faintly under the light of her wrist lamp. "If this really came from Earth," she said softly, "then someone wanted us to remember." Idrin tilted his head. "Memory is inefficient. Machines evolve by discarding old data. Why do humans cling to it?" She smiled faintly. "Because memory is what makes us human, Idrin. It's how we stay connected, even when time and space separate us." He seemed to think about that, though his eyes gave no sign of emotion. Then he asked him, "What will you do with it?" "I'll bring it back to the station," Mira said, standing up. "We need to study it carefully." The journey back to the control tower was silent. The transport hummed softly through the clouds as Mira stared out at the horizon. Illustra's silver fields rolled beneath them, endless and calm. Yet her thoughts were far from peaceful. She couldn't stop thinking about the message. Who recorded it? How had it survived for centuries? And most of all, why did it sound like a promise? When they landed, the Council's security drones were waiting. Mira Vance said a voice through the communicator. You are to report immediately to Central Command. The Council has questions about your unauthorized expedition. She frowned. They already know? Idrin answered quietly. They likely tracked our vessel through the atmosphere. You disobeyed protocol by leaving your assigned sector. Mira sighed. I know, but I had to. She picked up the beacon and placed it carefully inside a shielded case. We're going to Central Command, but we're bringing this with us. The council chamber was cold and bright, built from white stone and glowing glass. Holographic banners floated in the air, each one displaying the symbol of Illustra, a silver spiral surrounded by stars. 3 council members sat behind a transparent desk. They looked calm, but their eyes were sharp. Captain Vance, the eldest, said, We received your report about an unidentified signal, but you failed to mention an unsanctioned recovery operation. Mira stood straight. Yes, I acted without clearance, but I found something we can't ignore. She placed the small case on the table and opened it. The beacon pulsed faintly with light. What is that? Asked the second counselor. It's a memory beacon, Mira said. Old, maybe thousands of years. It carries a recorded human message from Earth. The room fell silent. The first counselor frowned. Impossible. Earth was lost before the colonization era. No signal could survive that long. Listen for yourself, Mira said, activating the playback. The room filled with soft sound, the same gentle voice. To those who came after us, we send our breath, our laughter, our steps. We walked the same winds once. Remember, you are never alone in the sky. For a moment, no one moved. Even the counselors seemed touched. But then their expressions hardened again. The first counselor leaned forward. And what do you intend to do with this? I want to trace the full signal, Mira replied. It's still active in the atmosphere. If we amplify it, we might uncover the complete message, maybe even connect it to other planets. The third counselor shook his head. You can't. If people hear this, it could cause chaos. They will start believing Earth still speaks to them. We cannot allow false hope to spread. Mira clenched her fists. It's not false hope. It's history, our history. Enough, the first counselor said firmly. The beacon will be placed under government control. You are relieved of duty until further notice. Mira stared at them, disbelief in her eyes. You can't bury this. It's for stability, the counselor said coldly. Peace depends on control. As the guards approached to take the beacon, Idrin suddenly stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was a strange tone in it, something almost human. Captain Vance acted to preserve knowledge, not to endanger it. Denying truth will not create peace. It will create silence. The guards hesitated. The counselors looked unsettled. Mira met Idrin's eyes, then nodded slightly. Let's go, she said quietly. They left the chamber without resistance, but she knew this wasn't over. That night, Mira sat alone in her quarters. The stars outside shimmered softly. She had no orders, no ship, no authority anymore, only the memory of that voice. Idrin entered silently. They have secured the beacon, he said. It is now in Central's data vault. I expected that, Mira said. He paused. You intend to take it back, don't you? She looked at him surprised. Would you help me? He nodded once. I was created to serve, but service requires understanding. I believe your cause holds meaning. Her heart softened. For a long time she had thought of Idrin as a machine. But now there was something in his tone. Quiet loyalty, maybe even emotion. Then we'll do this together, she said. They moved through the night toward Central Command. The city was silent except for the hum of drones and the whisper of wind through metal streets. Mira used her old fleet access codes to bypass the security gates. Inside the vault, endless rows of containment pods glowed faintly blue. In the center was the beacon, guarded by 2 drones. Idrin stepped forward and emitted a pulse of static. The drones froze. I have disabled them for 80 seconds, he said. Mira ran to the beacon and lifted it carefully. As soon as she touched it, the soft voice began again. stronger now, almost pleading. If you find this, remember what it felt like to walk together, under the same sky. Mira's eyes filled with tears. It's fading, she whispered. It's losing power. Then we must reach the tower, Idrin said. It is the highest atmospheric relay on this planet. There we can amplify it before it disappears. She nodded. Let's go. The Tower of Air stood on a high ridge surrounded by endless clouds. It was built during Elistra's first settlement, a massive spire that stretched into the upper atmosphere. The old engineers had called it the Heart of the Wind. They arrived as dawn painted the sky in gold and silver. Mira and Idrin climbed the long stairway inside. The air grew thinner, colder, but the beacon's glow grew stronger in her hands. Halfway up, a loud alarm echoed. The council had discovered their escape. A drone squadron was approaching. Adrin stopped and looked at her. You go, I will delay them. No, she said, you'll be destroyed. He smiled faintly, a small, almost human smile. Machines do not die, Captain. They simply end their function. Before she could reply, he turned and walked back down the stairs. The sound of battle began. Flashes of light, metal on metal, echoes fading into the wind. Mira ran upward, her heart pounding. The higher she climbed, the louder the wind became, carrying faint whispers, voices of laughter, songs, and tears. At the top, she reached the control console. The tower trembled under the storm. She placed the beacon in the core slot and activated the power relay. Come on, she whispered. Please work, the beacon pulsed. A wave of light spread through the air, soft, gentle, and full of sound. The wind around the tower began to sing, human voices merging into one great chorus. We walked with you. We still walk with you, the storm calmed. The sky turned bright, almost white with light. Mira stood there, wind rushing through her hair, listening to the echoes of her ancestors filling the air. She didn't know if Adrin had survived. She didn't even know if she would, but in that moment she felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. When the light faded, the beacon's glow settled into a steady rhythm. The voices remained, carried softly by every breeze that touched Elistra. Far below, people paused in their cities and fields, hearing the faint whispers in the wind, laughter, songs, greetings from long ago. And somewhere in the ruins below the tower, Idrin opened his eyes. His sensors flickered weakly. The storm had passed. The air was quiet. He stood, looked toward the distant horizon, and whispered the words he had heard from her. Not as a program, but as something more. We walked slowly, letting the breeze carry what we couldn't say. Sound, faint and beautiful like the breath of distant souls. The people stopped what they were doing, looked up and listened. The wind carried voices, laughter, songs, and words they could not fully understand, but somehow felt. Captain Mira Vance stood on the upper deck of the Tower of Air, weak but alive. The beacon still shone beside her, pulsing softly in rhythm with her heartbeat. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, but there was a calm light in her eyes. She had done it. The message of Earth had been freed. She looked out across the horizon where clouds glowed golden from the twin suns. The sound of the wind was different now, richer, alive, carrying a warmth that made her chest tighten. Idrin, she whispered. Her gaze drifted down the tower's long stairway. There was no sign of movement, only silence. She knew he had stayed behind to protect her. She had told him to run, but he hadn't listened. For a long time she just stood there, letting the wind blow through her hair. It felt like he was still there, like every gust of air carried his presence. Hours later, emergency ships from the council arrived at the tower. The soldiers climbed the stairs slowly, their faces filled with confusion. The voice from the wind had spread across the whole planet. No one knew what was happening. When they reached the top, they found Mira sitting near the beacon, wrapped in her coat, watching the clouds. One officer stepped forward. "Captain Vance," he said quietly. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. "No, just tired." He looked around. "What happened here?" "We detected a global resonance from this location. The entire atmosphere is singing." Mira smiled faintly. "It's not just the air. It's humanity's voice, and from long ago." He frowned. "A transmission?" "No," she said softly. "A memory." The officer didn't fully understand, but he could see the peace in her expression. He reported her words back to the council, but even they were uncertain. For the first time, the government of Illustra couldn't explain something. In the following days, the planet changed. The people began to gather in open fields, listening to the whispers that drifted through the wind. Some said they heard names, songs, and stories. Others felt emotions, love, hope, sadness, pride, as if the air itself remembered being human. Scientists tried to record and analyze the phenomenon, but the signals refused to stay still. Every recording changed like a living voice. The council held many meetings. Some leaders feared what this meant. Others thought it was a miracle, but no one could stop it. The message had become part of Illustra's sky, and in the middle of all this, Mira vanished from public view. She had gone back to the meadows where she used to walk with Idrin. The grass was tall and golden, moving gently in the wind. The air was filled with the same whispers, but to her they sounded different. They felt like conversation. She walked slowly, her boots brushing the soft ground. Every few steps she could almost hear him beside her, his calm voice, his careful way of speaking. "Air cannot speak, Captain," he had once said. She smiled faintly. "You were wrong," she whispered. "You taught it how." She sat down on the hill, looking toward the tower far in the distance. The beacon's faint glow was still visible, even from here. For the first time in many years, she felt truly connected to the planet, to the people, and to something much older than all of them. 3 days later, a small drone landed near her camp. It was old and damaged, its plating scorched from battle. When it opened, she saw something shining inside, a fragment of Idrin's memory core. She picked it up carefully. It was cracked but still functional. A tiny blue light blinked on its surface. When she activated it, a projection flickered in the air. Idrin's face, faint but clear. "Captain Vance," his voice said, slow and steady. "If this message reaches you, it means my function has ended, but I have learned something." The recording paused for a moment, as if the machine itself was trying to find the right words. "I was built to understand logic, but you showed me something different. You showed me silence, the kind that speaks more than words. You showed me what it means to walk slowly and listen. I think that is what humans call life." Mira felt tears fill her eyes. The projection smiled, small, imperfect, but real. "Wherever you go, Captain, I will be there. In the wind, in the air, in the quiet moments between stars. That is where I will walk." Then the light faded, leaving only the soft sound of the breeze. Mira held the small core against her heart. "You learned well, my friend," she whispered. "Better than most of us ever did." Months passed. Illustra became a planet of listening. People built wind temples, not for worship but for remembrance. Travelers from other colonies came to hear the voice of the wind. The phenomenon spread beyond the planet, carried by solar currents into space. Ships passing through the system reported hearing faint sounds in their communication channels. A whisper that said, "We walked with you. We still walk with you." For the first time in history, humans and aliens both paused to listen. The Vorn, the species humanity had once fought, arrived in Illustra's orbit with no weapons, only questions. Their leader, Vasthier, met Mira on the planet's surface. He was tall and strange-looking, with silver skin that shimmered like the wind itself. He bowed his head. "Your world sings. It calls across the stars. We hear it in our dreams," Mira smiled. "It's not a call of war. It's a memory of peace." The alien nodded slowly. Perhaps that is the strongest weapon of all. They stood together in silence, the wind brushing against them both, human and alien, flesh and metal, connected by something invisible yet powerful. Years passed. Mira grew older. She no longer commanded towers or ships. She became known as the Keeper of Winds, the woman who listened to the voices of humanity. Children came to see her, asking what the whisper said. She always answered the same way. They say, "Keep walking. Don't forget who you are." As her hair turned white and her steps grew slower, she spent more time by the meadow where it had all begun. She often spoke to the air as if Idrin were still beside her, and perhaps in some way he was. One evening, as the twin suns began to set, painting the sky orange and silver, she felt the wind grow stronger, gentle, warm, full of sound. She smiled. "You're here again," she said softly. A faint voice, like static but filled with emotion, answered from the air. "Always," She laughed quietly, eyes closed. It's beautiful, isn't it? The wind remembers everything. The voice seemed to hum in agreement. She sat there for a long time, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Then she whispered, "We did it, Idrin. The wind carries us now." Her eyes grew heavy. The breeze wrapped around her like a soft blanket. The last thing she felt was warmth, not from the suns, but from the air itself, filled with every voice that had ever lived. Years later, travelers on distant planets would still hear the same faint signal carried through space, a message older than any star map, softer than any song. When they slowed their ships and listened carefully, they could make out the words, "We walked slowly," letting the breeze carry our unspoken feelings, and now the breeze carries a forever. The message never ended. It drifted between stars through dust and light, through silence and memory, a reminder that humanity was never gone, only transformed, and on Illustra, where the wind still sang, people would sometimes see a shimmer of light beside the meadows, the shape of a woman and a tall figure walking side by side. They said the two never spoke, but they didn't need to.